A man's body found on a quiet beach. No ID. No answers. A cryptic message. Tamam Shud. A book with a missing page. A code left behind. A woman's phone number. A man's final secrets. Who was he? And why was he silenced? The mystery begins, and the search for truth will span decades. On December 1st, 1948, a couple walking along Somerton Beach, located just south of Adelaide, South Australia, discovered an unidentified man's body. At first they assumed he was simply asleep, lying against the seawall, with his legs extended in front of him and his feet crossed. It seemed like an ordinary scene. However, upon closer inspection, they realized the man was lifeless, cold, and unresponsive. The couple quickly called the authorities, but no one had seen or heard the man before, and his cause of death was unclear. When police arrived, they found the man to be in good physical condition and well-dressed. He was around 40 to 45 years old, wearing a white shirt, a red, white, and blue tie, brown trousers, and a gray-brown double-breasted jacket. His clothes seemed expensive, suggesting a man of higher standing. But the most puzzling detail was that all the labels in his clothing had been removed. There was no personal identification found on him, nor was there any clue that could link him to the area, or anyone in particular. The man's body showed no visible signs of violence or struggle. A search of his pockets turned up several items: an unused second-class rail ticket from Adelaide to Henley Beach, a bus ticket, a narrow aluminium comb, made in the US, a half-empty packet of juicy fruit chewing gum, a pack of Cansita cigarettes, and a quarter-full box of Bryant & May matches. These common items didn't provide any real leads, but what stood out most was the half-smoked cigarette found on the man's right collar, suggesting that he had been alive shortly before his death. However, with no visible injuries or trauma, the cause of death was still a mystery. An autopsy conducted by pathologist John Burton Cleland revealed some unusual findings. While the man's body appeared in good health, Cleland noted internal congestion, especially in the stomach and liver, leading him to suspect poisoning. But when toxicology tests were conducted, no common poisons or foreign substances were detected. The only conclusion Cleland could offer was that the man's death could have been caused by poisoning, but without concrete evidence, it could not be definitively proven. As days passed, no one came forward to claim the man's body. His identity remained unknown, and the case was at a standstill. But then, on January 14th, 1949, a breakthrough came. A brown suitcase was found at the Adelaide railway station. The suitcase had been checked in on November 30th, 1948, the day before the body was discovered. Inside the suitcase, investigators found a red check dressing gown, slippers, shaving items, and a small square of zinc. The suitcase also contained a label with the name Keane, but no missing person by that name was reported. The link between the suitcase and the body was unclear, and investigators could not determine who the man was or how he had ended up on the beach. The case took another twist when a scrap of paper with the words Tamam Shud was discovered in the man's trousers. This Persian phrase, meaning it is finished, or the end, pointed investigators to a rare edition of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, a Persian poetry book. The connection to the Rubaiyat seemed to open a new path in the investigation. Police found a 1941 edition of the Rubaiyat published in Christchurch, New Zealand, and confirmed that the final page of the book was missing, matching the scrap of paper found with the man. The Tamam Shud message was linked directly to this book. Upon further investigation, the back cover of the book showed faint indentations, which appeared to be handwritten text. The markings seemed to form a cipher, the code that had been deliberately hidden. Investigators could not decipher the code, which only added to the mystery. Was the cipher a clue left by the man? Was it related to espionage, or was it simply part of something more personal? The code seemed to hold the key to understanding the case, but it remained unsolved. The investigation then took a sharp turn when it was revealed that the phone number of a woman named Jessica Thompson was written inside the back of the book. Jessica Thompson, a nurse living in Glenelg, was contacted by the police. She claimed to have owned a copy of the Rubaiyat, which she had given to an army lieutenant, Alf Boxall, during the war. However, she denied knowing the Somerton Man. The connection between Jessica and the Somerton Man seemed suspicious, and the phone number in the book raised more questions. Why had the Somerton Man had her number? The police then tracked down Alf Boxall and showed him the Rubaiyat. His copy of the book was found to be intact, with the final page still in place, ruling him out as the Somerton Man. However, this didn't explain the link between Jessica Thompson, Alf Boxall, and the Somerton Man. As the investigation continued, theories of espionage began to surface, given the Cold War climate and the mysterious circumstances surrounding the man's death. Was the Somerton Man part of an intelligence operation? Was he a spy, or a victim of political intrigue? These theories, though compelling, were never confirmed, and the mystery surrounding the Somerton Man continued to grow. Despite the identification of Carl Webb in 2022, the cause of his death remains unclear. Poisoning is still suspected, but no evidence has been found to prove it. The Tamam Shud clue, the Rubaiyat, the cipher, and the connection to Jessica Thomson continue to spark debate. The Somerton Man remains one of Australia's greatest unsolved mysteries, with new leads and theories continuing to emerge even today. The case of the Somerton Man, once thought to be an isolated death, has remained open and unsolved for over 70 years. While the identity of the man has been confirmed, the full truth of his death, the meaning of the cryptic clues he left behind, and the circumstances surrounding his death remain as elusive as ever. The mystery continues to haunt investigators, and the Somerton Man's death remains a puzzle that has yet to be solved. On December 1st, 1948, the quiet beach at Somerton Park, a suburb of Adelaide, South Australia, became the scene of a baffling mystery. A couple, taking their usual walk along the shore, first noticed the body of an unknown man lying on the sand. His head was gently resting against a seawall. His legs were stretched out, and his feet were crossed in an unusual way. Initially, the couple thought he was simply resting or sleeping, his position calm and undisturbed. The half-smoked cigarette on his coat collar suggested he had been alive shortly before they found him. However, as they approached, they realized something was wrong. The man was cold and unresponsive, and it quickly became clear that he was dead. They called the police immediately. By 6:30 a.m., authorities arrived at the scene. The body was located near the crippled children's home, not far from the Esplanade and Bickford Terrace. Despite initial thoughts that the man might have passed out due to intoxication, there were no signs of struggle or foul play. His clothes were neat, and there were no visible injuries. The man was dressed in a white shirt, a red, white, and blue tie, brown trousers, and a gray and brown double-breasted jacket, clothing in an American style. His shoes were polished, indicating someone who took care in his appearance. However, what stood out was the absence of any identification. There were no personal belongings, such as a wallet, ID papers, or even labels on his clothing. The tags from his clothes had been removed. In his pockets, the authorities found several items that seemed ordinary at first, but would later raise more questions. These included an unused second-class rail ticket from Adelaide to Henley Beach, indicating recent travel, an unused bus ticket, a narrow aluminum cone made in the United States, a half-empty packet of juicy fruit chewing gum, an Army Club cigarette packet containing 7 cigarettes of a different brand, Ken Cetus, and a quarter-full box of Bryant and May matches. During the autopsy, the man's last meal was identified as a pasty. Despite this, no signs of poisoning or unusual substances were found. The cause of death remained a mystery. The only clue that seemed significant was the half-smoked cigarette on his collar, suggesting he had been alive shortly before being found. His position seemed to imply that he had died while resting, but the lack of any clear cause left investigators with few leads. The authorities began questioning possible witnesses. Some came forward and reported seeing a man who resembled the body lying in the same spot on the evening of November 30th, 1948. One witness said they saw the man around 7 p.m., resting with one arm extended, before it dropped limply. Another couple saw him between 7:30 and 8 p.m., and noted that he hadn't moved during their observation, leading them to assume he was asleep or intoxicated. They left without suspecting anything unusual. However, one witness reported seeing a figure standing over the man, looking down from a set of steps leading to the beach. While this action was strange, it did not lead to further investigation at that time. As the police examined the body, they found no clear answers. Pathologist John Burton Cleland performed the autopsy and estimated the time of death to be around 2 a.m. on December 1st. He ruled out natural causes and suggested that the man's death might have been caused by poisoning. The body showed signs of acute congestion in several organs, including the brain, liver, and spleen, but no identifiable poison was found. Cleland speculated that the poison might have been something like a barbiturate or a soluble hypnotic, substances that could be fatal in large doses, but hard to detect in a standard toxicology test. Further tests yielded no new information, and the authorities were left with more questions than answers. Why had the man been in that particular spot on the beach? Why was there no identify the man? He was buried in a pauper's grave at West Terrace Cemetery in Adelaide on June 14, 1949. The case went cold, and the mystery of who he was and how he had died remained unresolved. However, months later, a new clue would emerge that would reopen the investigation. In January 1949, police received a tip about a brown suitcase found at the Adelaide railway station on January 14, 1949. The suitcase had been checked in on the same day the man was last seen. Inside the suitcase were several personal items: a red checkered dressing gown, slippers, underwear, shaving items, and other everyday belongings. There was also a small square of zinc, which investigators later found was likely used to protect a knife or sharp instrument. The suitcase also contained pencils, unused letter stationery, and a few labels, including one with the name Keane. Although the police could not find any missing person by that name, the Keane label stood out. They began to focus on this detail, wondering if it could be a clue, or just a coincidence. They also discovered that the clothing in the suitcase was likely American-made, raising further questions about the man's connection to the United States. The suitcase, combined with the man's American-style clothing, and the lack of identification, pointed to a more complex case than anyone had expected. Investigators began to wonder if the Somerton Man could have been connected to espionage, or had a deeper secret. But even with the new leads, the case remained unsolved, and the identity of the Somerton Man continued to elude authorities. Despite the setbacks, the discovery of the suitcase and its contents would lead the investigation in new directions. These findings would eventually bring the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam into play, but that part of the mystery would only unfold later. For now, the case was at a standstill, with few clues to work with. The Somerton Man had become a haunting enigma, and the search for answers continued, slowly building the intrigue around his identity and mysterious death. On the morning of December 1st, 1948, a couple walking along the beach at Somerton Park, located south of Adelaide, South Australia, stumbled upon a troubling discovery. They saw a man's body lying against the seawall, with his legs stretched out in front of him, his feet crossed in an odd manner. Initially, they thought the man was just resting, perhaps asleep, but as they approached, they realized the man was cold and unresponsive, lifeless. They immediately called the police. By 6:30 a.m., law enforcement arrived. Despite the peaceful appearance of the man, no signs of injury or struggle were found. His clothing was neat, and there was nothing to suggest violence. In his pockets, the police found several personal items: an unused second-class rail ticket from Adelaide to Henley Beach, an unused bus ticket, a narrow aluminum cone from the United States, a half-empty packet of juicy fruit chewing gum, an Army Club cigarette packet with 7 Concita cigarettes, and a quarter-full box of Bryant & May matches. There was also a half-smoked cigarette on the man's right collar, suggesting he had been alive shortly before his death. Witnesses had seen a man who resembled the body lying in the same position the evening before. One witness saw him at 7 p.m. on November 30th, 1948, with his arm extended before it dropped limply. Another couple noticed him between 7:30 p.m. and 8 p.m., observing that he hadn't moved at all during their observation. They assumed he was asleep or drunk, and left him alone. A third witness, however, saw another person standing over the man, looking down at him from a set of steps leading to the beach. This individual's behavior was peculiar, but authorities didn't pursue it further. The investigation into the man's death proved frustrating. Pathologist John Burton Cleland performed an autopsy, estimating the time of death to be around 2 a.m. on December 1st. He ruled out natural causes and suspected poisoning, as the body showed signs of acute congestion in several organs, including the brain, liver, and spleen. However, no identifiable poison was found in the body. Cleland speculated the poison might have been a barbiturate or soluble hypnotic, substances that could be fatal in large doses, but might not be detected in a typical toxicology test. Despite further tests, the cause of death remained unclear. The police had no identification, and dental records didn't match any missing persons. There were no obvious signs of trauma or injury. The man's clothing was unusual, neat, well-tailored, and of American style. However, the absence of any identification left investigators with more questions than answers. In early December, the body was embalmed, but there were still no new leads. The man was buried in a pauper's grave at West Terrace Cemetery, Adelaide, on June 14, 1949. As the months passed, the case seemed to stall, but a new development would soon surface, providing the investigation with fresh clues. In January 1949, the police received a tip. A brown suitcase had been found at the Adelaide railway station on January 14, 1949, checked in on the same day as the man's last known movements. The suitcase contained several personal items: a red checkered dressing gown, slippers, underwear, shaving items, and other everyday items. One particularly interesting find was a small square of zinc, which investigators later discovered was likely used to protect a knife or sharp instrument. The suitcase also contained pencils, unused letter stationery, and some labels, one of which read Keane. Despite efforts to trace anyone with the name Keane, no missing persons were linked to that name. However, the Keane label stood out. Authorities began to question whether it could be a clue. The clothing found in the suitcase was likely American-made, which was odd, considering there was no apparent link between the man and the United States. As the investigation continued, the authorities knew they were dealing with a case far more complex than initially assumed. Too many unanswered questions remained. The Somerton man's identity and cause of death were elusive, but investigators had a hunch that they were just starting to uncover something much bigger. The suitcase and its contents were not the final pieces of the puzzle. Eventually, the investigation would lead to the discovery of a book, the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, which would provide significant clues, but the path to that revelation would be slow, and the case would remain unresolved for months. For now, the case had hit another standstill, with no immediate progress. The public continued to speculate about the identity of the Somerton man. Was he an unknown spy, a suicide victim, or someone hiding a deeper secret? The answers were far from clear, and the investigation remained one of Australia's most perplexing unsolved mysteries. Though the suitcase brought new attention to the case, authorities were still no closer to uncovering the truth. But the discovery of the book would ultimately take the investigation in an unexpected direction, signaling the beginning of a new chapter in the mystery. For now, however, the case had reached another dead end, with very few clues to follow. In July 1949, a breakthrough came in the Somerton Man case, when a man, known as Ronald Francis in police reports, came forward with a rare edition of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. This book was directly linked to the scrap of paper found in the man's pocket, which contained the phrase, Tamam Shud. The connection between the book and the scrap was undeniable, and investigators hoped this new lead would finally shed light on the mystery. Ronald Francis had discovered the book in a car parked in Glenelg, just a short distance from the location where the Somerton man's body had been found. The book was a 1941 edition of the Rubaiyat, published by Whitcomb and Toombs in Christchurch, New Zealand. Upon closer inspection, investigators noticed that the final page of the book was missing, the very page from which the Tamam Shud scrap had been torn. What truly caught their attention, however, were the faint indentations visible on the inside cover of the book. These indentations weren't random. They appeared to be remnants of handwritten text. The writing, although faint, was readable after some effort. The deciphered text read, WRGOABOB, DBBM PANATP, XEMLIOBO AIAQC, IT EMTS AMCGAB. At first glance, the letters didn't form any recognizable words, and the meaning of the sequence was unclear. However, it was immediately obvious to investigators that these lines represented some kind of coded message. The nature of the code, whether it was a simple cipher, shorthand, or something more complex, remained unclear. The stricken letters in one of the lines, and the X above another, suggested the message had been intentionally manipulated. With the discovery of this code, the authorities enlisted the help of codebreakers and cryptography experts to crack it. The unusual nature of the message sparked intense interest, and there was hope that this could be the key to solving the mystery of the Somerton man's identity. However, deciphering the code proved difficult. The sequence of letters was too short for traditional cryptographic methods, and experts struggled to make significant progress. While cryptographers worked on the code, the public's fascination with the case grew. The connection to Omar Khayyam's poetry and the mysterious nature of the Rubaiyat piqued the interest of many, and various theories began circulating. Some speculated that the Somerton man might have been involved in espionage, and that the coded message was part of a secret communication. Others believed the message could be a personal note, possibly from someone close to the man, and that it held a clue to his death. As the cryptographers continued to study the code, the focus shifted to the book's connection to the Somerton man. The Tamam Shud scrap, found in the man's pocket, clearly had a direct link to the book. The question arose, why had the man carried the book? Why had he hidden it in his pocket? These questions lingered in the minds of investigators. The police also turned their attention to the telephone number found inside the book. This number led them to Jessica Thompson, a woman living in Glenelg, near where the body had been discovered. When the police contacted Jessica, she denied knowing the man, or why her number had appeared in the book. However, she did admit that she had once given a copy of the Rubaiyat to an army officer named Alf Boxall during the war. This new lead suggested a possible connection to the Alf Boxall and the Somerton man. The investigation into Alf Boxall revealed that he had served in the Royal Australian Engineers during World War II, and had been stationed in Sydney, where he met Jessica. It was also revealed that Jessica had given him a copy of the Rubaiyat as a gift in 1945. Investigators now suspected that Alf Boxall might be the Somerton man. However, after questioning him in July 1949, it became clear that he wasn't the man found on Somerton Park Beach. Boxall still had his copy of the Rubaiyat, and when examined, the last page was intact. Furthermore, Jessica Harkness had signed her name in the front of Boxall's book, confirming that he was not the Somerton man. The police investigation had now ruled out Alf Boxall as a suspect, but the connection to Jessica Thompson remained suspicious. Investigators began to wonder if she knew more than she was letting on. In the months that followed, the case stagnated once again. The code remained unsolved, and the Somerton man's identity and cause of death continued to elude authorities. Yet, the discovery of the book, the Tamam Shud scrap, and Jessica's involvement deepened the mystery. The puzzle pieces were slowly coming together, but they still didn't fit. Despite the lack of immediate progress, the case continued to intrigue the public. The Somerton man's identity remained a mystery, and the Rubaiyat and its connection to the man became central to the investigation. The Tamam Shud scrap, the coded message, and Jessica's link to the case raised more questions than answers. As the investigation continued, the mystery of the Somerton man would eventually lead to further discoveries. But for now, the case had reached another dead end. The Somerton man remained an enigma, but the discoveries made so far had set the stage for the next chapter in the search for the truth. The code, the book, and Jessica Thompson's involvement would continue to haunt the investigation for years to come. The discovery of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, with its cryptic coded message and connection to Jessica Thompson, brought a new focus to the Somerton man case. Jessica became the center of the investigation. Her number had been found in the back of the book, and she had acknowledged giving a copy to Alf Boxall in 1945. The book, along with the Tamam Shud scrap of paper, seemed to hold significant clues pointing to a deeper mystery. As police questioned Jessica, they found her responses to be increasingly evasive. She denied any connection to the Somerton man and insisted that she had never met him. However, she did admit that she had given Alf Boxall, an army officer she knew during the war, a copy of the Rubaiyat. Despite this admission, she denied any knowledge of how her number had ended up in the back of the book found with the dead man. The police's suspicions grew, especially since her telephone number had been directly linked to the book. The police then turned to Alf Boxall for more answers. In July 1949, they tracked him down, hoping he could shed light on the Somerton man's identity. After questioning Boxall, the investigators ruled him out as a suspect. He had been stationed in Sydney during the war, and his own copy of the Rubaiyat was still intact. The page that had been torn out of the Somerton man's book was present in his copy. Boxall denied knowing the Somerton man and had no recollection of meeting him. There was no evidence linking him to the case. With Boxall ruled out, the focus shifted back to Jessica. The connection between her, Boxall, and the Somerton man remained too significant to ignore. Jessica's reluctance to provide details about her past or any connection to the man raised more questions. Jerry Feltus, a former detective, would later describe her behavior as evasive, leading him to believe that she might have known more than she was letting on. Feltus speculated that Jessica could have been involved in the case in some way, but was unwilling to reveal what she knew. Further investigations into Jessica's background raised even more suspicions. She had worked as a nurse during the war, and some suggested she might have had ties to intelligence work. There were even rumors that Jessica and the Somerton man were connected through espionage, though no concrete evidence supported these claims. The more investigators looked into Jessica, the more the case began to hint at a possible link to covert activities. The mysterious nature of the Somerton man's death, the coded message, and Jessica's potential connection to military or intelligence circles led some to consider the possibility of espionage being involved. Despite the increasing theories about espionage, Jessica continued to deny any connection to the Somerton man, and the investigation had no further solid leads. The case stalled once again, with the connection between Jessica, Boxall, and the Somerton man remaining unresolved. In the years that followed, Jessica Thompson's name would continue to be associated with the Somerton man case. Interviews with some of her relatives suggested that Jessica might have known more about the mystery than she had let on. Kate Thompson, her daughter, would later claim that Jessica had lied to the police about her involvement with the Somerton man. She hinted that Jessica might have known the dead man's identity and had some connection to the theories of espionage surrounding the case. Despite the passage of time, Jessica's role in the Somerton man mystery continued to spark intrigue. In the years following her death, in 2007, the questions surrounding her involvement persisted. Her connection to the case remained a subject of interest, particularly as new developments surfaced over time. Theories about her possible ties to intelligence or espionage continued to linger, though no definitive proof has ever surfaced to confirm any such involvement. As the Somerton man case remained unsolved for decades, the links between Jessica, Boxall, and the Somerton man would continue to haunt the investigation. The case, which had captured the attention of the public for so many years, remains one of Australia's most enduring and perplexing unsolved mysteries. The mystery of the Somerton man would continue to elude investigators, and the connections between Jessica Thompson, Alf Boxall, and the dead man would remain a key focus of speculation and intrigue. Despite numerous theories about espionage, romantic involvement, and intelligence work, the true identity of the Somerton man has never been conclusively determined. As of today, the case remains an open mystery, with no answers in sight. The Somerton man case has become a symbol of unresolved intrigue, with its tangled web of connections, cryptic messages, and mysterious deaths still captivating those who continue to study it. The involvement of Jessica Thompson, Alf Boxall and the coded message in the Rubaiyat remains one of the key unsolved pieces of the puzzle. And as time goes on, the mystery endures. As the investigation into the Somerton Man case progressed, the focus shifted back to the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, the book connected to the mysterious death. The book had become central to the investigation, and its significance only grew as investigators realized that the coded message in the back cover might hold the key to solving the case. The book had already proven to be an essential clue, with its missing final page and connection to the Tamam Shud scrap of paper found in the man's pocket. Despite bringing in cryptographers, police and other specialists to decipher the markings in the book, no one was able to crack the code. Various methods were applied, including encryption techniques and shorthand analysis, but none fit the known systems. The lack of progress left everyone frustrated, and some speculated that the code might not even be a formal cipher, but rather the result of a disturbed mind, or an attempt to mask a personal message. Yet, despite these challenges, the book remained at the heart of the investigation. The Rubaiyat was a rare edition published in New Zealand in 1941, making it a unique clue. Its missing last page, from which the Tamam Shud scrap had been torn, was another puzzling element. Police were unsure if the page had been intentionally removed, or if it held deeper significance. The connection to Jessica Thompson remained key. The telephone number found in the back of the book led the police directly to her. While Jessica denied knowing the Somerton Man, her connection to the book and the coded message raised suspicions. She admitted to giving a copy of the Rubaiyat to Alf Boxall, an army officer she had known during the war, but she denied knowing anything about the dead man or the book's mystery. As investigators delved into Jessica's background, more questions arose. While she had been linked to Boxall, whose book was still intact, Jessica's telephone number was found in the Somerton Man's book. Jessica continued to deny any connection to the Somerton Man, and the link between Jessica Boxall and the Somerton Man seemed too significant to ignore. As the investigation continued, speculation grew that the Somerton Man might have been involved in espionage. The case unfolded during the early years of the Cold War, a period of global tension. The coded message, the puzzling nature of the death, and the involvement of Jessica and Boxall raised the possibility that the Somerton Man might have been a spy or part of a secret mission. The case seemed to hint at a spy communication, especially given the cryptic nature of the clues. Despite all the theories, the investigation stagnated. The code remained unsolved, and the Somerton Man's identity and cause of death remained a mystery. The connection between Jessica Thompson, Alf Boxall, and the book continued to fuel public speculation, but no concrete answers emerged. In 2002, a DNA test on a strand of hair from the Somerton Man's plaster death mask provided a significant breakthrough. The test revealed a match to Carl Webb, an electrical engineer born in 1905 in Melbourne. While this identification seemed promising, it didn't solve the case. Carl Webb's life appeared troubled, and investigators speculated that he might have died from suicide, possibly by poisoning. Yet, the connection between Webb, the book, and the coded message remained unclear. The investigation seemed to take on more significance as new developments emerged. The Rubaiyat, once just a clue, now appeared to be the key to understanding the Somerton Man's final days. Carl Webb's troubled history, combined with the code, suggested he might have been trying to communicate something about his death or life. But despite these new insights, the connection between Jessica Alf Boxall and the Somerton Man remained unresolved. As the case continued to unfold, the Somerton Man case became more and more entrenched in public fascination. The theories of espionage, the puzzling clues, and the coded message provide the answers that had evaded investigators for decades. Was Carl Webb truly the Somerton Man? And if so, what had led to his death? The answers to these questions may never come to light. The Somerton Man's story, with its cryptic clues, hidden messages, and unresolved mysteries, would continue to haunt those who sought answers. The Somerton Man case remained one of Australia's most enduring unsolved mysteries. The identification of Carl Webb brought new attention to the case, but the Rubaiyat, the code, and the connections to Jessica Thompson would continue to captivate both investigators and the public for years to come. The mystery still lingered, and as new technologies and genetic testing improved, it seemed that one day, perhaps, the case might be resolved. For now, though, the Somerton Man remains a shadowy figure whose true story is yet to be fully revealed. By 2022, the Somerton Man case, which had eluded investigators for over 7 decades, was on the verge of a breakthrough. After years of cryptic clues, dead ends, and endless speculation, a significant development emerged. In July 2022, Professor Derek Abbott from the University of Adelaide, in collaboration with genealogist Colleen M. Fitzpatrick, announced that the Somerton Man had been identified as Carl Charles Webb, an electrical engineer born in 1905 in Footscray, a suburb of Melbourne. This identification was made possible through genetic genealogy. The DNA from a strand of hair taken from the plastered death mask of the Somerton Man was analyzed and compared with genetic databases. The analysis revealed a match with Webb's living relatives, providing a breakthrough in a case that had remained unsolved for decades. Although the police initially had reservations, the connection was confirmed, offering a crucial piece of the puzzle. Yet, while the identification of Carl Webb answered many questions, it also raised new ones about his life and the events leading up to his death. Webb's life, before his mysterious demise, had been somewhat isolated. He worked as an electrical instrument maker, but his personal history was filled with challenges. Relatives recalled that he had endured the loss of several close family members in a short period, which appeared to have had a significant impact on his mental health. Some suggested that these losses had made Webb more withdrawn, and that he had even attempted suicide in the past. This added weight to the theory that Webb might have died from suicide, possibly by poisoning, making this the most plausible explanation for his death on Somerton Park Beach. However, the connection between Webb, Jessica Thompson, and Alf Boxall added layers of complexity to the case. The Rubaiyat and the cryptic code in the book remain central to understanding the Somerton Man's death. It was unclear why Webb had been involved in such an unusual set of circumstances. What was the significance of the code? Had he been trying to convey something with it? Was it meant for someone specific? Or was it a personal message he left behind? Jessica Thompson played a key role in the investigation due to her connection to the Rubaiyat and the telephone number found in the book. She had denied knowing the Somerton Man, but her link to Alf Boxall, who had received a copy of the Rubaiyat, only deepened the mystery. While Boxall's copy of the book was still intact, Jessica's continued association with both Boxall and the Somerton Man made it difficult to dismiss her role in the case. Some speculated that Jessica and Webb might have been involved in a romantic relationship, but there was no concrete evidence to support this theory. As investigators continued to probe deeper into Jessica's background, a theory emerged that espionage might be connected to the case. The Somerton Man's death occurred during the early Cold War, a period when global tensions were high. The presence of a coded message, the unusual circumstances of Webb's death, and Jessica's connections to Boxall, a military man, all fueled speculations that intelligence activities could have been involved. However, no conclusive evidence supported the idea that either Jessica or Carl Webb had any ties to espionage or covert operations. Even with the identification of Carl Webb, many questions remained. The Rubaiyat, the coded message, and Webb's death continued to fuel intrigue. Had Webb's identity been hidden for a reason? Was the code in the book meant to convey something significant about his life? Or was it simply a personal message left in his final moments? In 2002, a DNA test on a hair sample from the plaster death mask of the Somerton Man provided a crucial lead when it revealed a match to Carl Webb, an electrical engineer from Melbourne, born in 1905. However, this revelation did not completely solve the case. While Webb's identity was confirmed, the cause of his death and the meaning behind the coded message remained unresolved. Investigators speculated that Webb might have died from suicide, possibly as a result of poisoning, but there was still no concrete proof. The mystery of Carl Webb's life and death remained unsolved. The Rubaiyat and its coded message held the key to understanding what happened in his final days. But it was unclear what Webb had been trying to communicate. Had the code been a message for someone else? Or was it an attempt to leave something behind for himself? Despite all the efforts to uncover the truth, the Somerton Man case remained an open-ended mystery. Jessica Thompson's role continued to be a subject of speculation, and the connection between her, Alf Boxall, and Carl Webb only deepened the intrigue. The Somerton Man's death, combined with the Rubaiyat and its enigmatic code, seemed too deliberate, too mysterious to be a random event. Many believed there was more to the story, but the true nature of Carl Webb's involvement in the case, and the reason for his death, would likely remain unanswered. Although Webb's identification through genetic testing brought new insights into the Somerton Man case, many questions still lingered. Was the code in the Rubaiyat ever fully deciphered? Was Carl Webb the Somerton Man? And if so, why had his identity been concealed for so long? The Somerton Man case continued to be one of Australia's most enduring and mysterious unsolved cases, leaving investigators and the public to wonder if the true story of Carl Webb's life and death would ever be fully revealed. After the identification of Carl Webb, investigators hoped the Somerton Man case would finally come to a close. Yet, despite this breakthrough, many critical questions surrounding Webb's death and the mysterious circumstances leading up to it remained unanswered. The Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, the coded message, and Jessica Thompson's connections to the case all continued to hang in the background, leaving behind more theories than clear answers. The discovery of Carl Webb's identity was only part of the puzzle. The deeper mystery lay in how and why he had died in such a bizarre and carefully staged manner. He had been found well dressed, with no identification, and the cryptic message seemed to indicate an intentional concealment of his identity. Was he hiding from someone? Had he been involved in something far more dangerous than a personal tragedy? The circumstances surrounding his death were as enigmatic as ever. Webb's body had been found on Somerton Park Beach, lying in an unusual position, his clothes meticulously arranged, suggesting the possibility that someone had carefully placed him there. The absence of vomiting or other typical signs of poisoning left investigators struggling to identify the exact cause of death. A toxicological analysis failed to detect any common poisons, leading authorities to suspect that a more sophisticated form of poisoning may have been used. Some experts suggested that substances like cardiac glycosides, potent poisons often hard to detect, could have been involved. Digitalis and ouabain, drugs in the same class, were among the suspected causes of death. Webb's background, which had seemed relatively uneventful at first, began to reveal a more complicated story. Investigators discovered that he had suffered mental health issues, particularly after the loss of several close family members in a short period of time. These losses seemed to have profoundly impacted his mental state, and relatives recalled that Webb had become more withdrawn in the years leading up to his death. He had even attempted suicide earlier in life, which made the theory of suicide by poisoning plausible. But was it truly suicide, or had someone else been involved? The investigation then returned to Jessica Thompson, whose name had been linked to the case ever since the telephone number was found in the Rubaiyat. Despite her insistence that she had no connection to the Somerton Man, her reluctance to provide clear answers only deepened the mystery. Jessica's connections to both Alf Boxall and the Somerton Man raised more questions about her role. Some speculated that Jessica might have been involved in espionage, while others thought she might know more about Webb's death than she was willing to admit. She lived in Glenalg, just a short distance from where the body was found, and her relationship with Alf Boxall during the war seemed to be a key part of the puzzle. Jessica's evasiveness during police interviews made it difficult to trust her statements. Although she denied knowing the Somerton Man, her association with both Boxall and the dead man suggested that she might have known more than she was letting on. Jessica's background also became a focal point. She had worked as a nurse during the war, and some speculated that she might have had ties to intelligence work, which could explain her connection to the Somerton Man. With no new information from Jessica, the investigation turned back to the code in the Rubaiyat. Cryptographers continued to work on cracking the message, but it proved to be a difficult challenge. The coded message didn't match any known ciphers, and its brevity made it difficult to apply traditional cryptographic techniques. Some believed it might have been a personal code, known only to the Somerton Man, or someone close to him. But if that was the case, why had he left it behind in the book? What was the message meant to convey? And who was it intended for? In 2011, a new lead emerged when Monsieur Henneberg, a biological anthropologist, began looking into the case. Henneberg focused on a specific ID card found among Carl Webb's possessions. The card, issued in the United States during World War I to foreign seamen, showed a man with similar facial features to the Somerton Man. Henneberg believed the man on the ID card, H.C. Reynolds, might be the same person as the Somerton Man. However, after searching through national archives and other records, investigators were unable to confirm his identity. Henneberg also conducted a study on the Somerton Man's ear, finding that its shape resembled that of H.C. Reynolds. This led to another intriguing clue. Although it was not fully confirmed, the theory that Reynolds and the Somerton Man might be the same person added complexity to the case, but didn't provide a definitive answer. Despite these promising developments, the Somerton Man case remained unsolved. Theories about his identity and death continued to evolve. Was he Carl Webb, or was he someone else entirely? Was his death tied to espionage? Was it suicide or something more sinister? In the years that followed, interest in the Somerton Man case remained high. The DNA analysis had confirmed Webb's identity, but it had not explained the circumstances of his death. Investigators still hadn't deciphered the code in the Rubaiyat, and no concrete links had been established between Jessica Thompson, Alf Boxall, and the Somerton Man. The questions surrounding the Somerton Man's death remained as puzzling as ever. Despite the identification of Carl Webb, many believed the case had not been fully solved. The mystery of the code, the strange nature of his death, and the eerie circumstances surrounding his final moments continued to intrigue both investigators and the public. As new technologies and DNA testing advanced, some believed the case might one day be fully resolved. For now, though, the Somerton Man remained one of Australia's most enduring and unsolved mysteries. Though Carl Webb had been identified, the true nature of his death, the meaning of the Rubaiyat and its coded message, and the mysterious connection to Jessica Thompson and Alf Boxall remain unresolved. The Somerton Man case had entered its final stages, but the questions remained just out of reach. The identity of the Somerton Man might be known, but his story had yet to be fully told. With the identification of Carl Webb and the continuing cryptic clues surrounding the Somerton man's death, the case remained open yet as elusive as ever. While the DNA analysis had confirmed Webb's identity, many key questions remained unanswered. Why did he end up on Somerton Park Beach? Was his death truly a suicide? Or was something more nefarious at play? The Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam and the coded message continued to haunt investigators, leaving them wondering whether Webb had left behind a clue, or whether it was simply a misguided attempt to communicate something more personal. As authorities returned their attention to the timeline of Carl Webb's life, it became clear that the man had suffered substantial personal losses. In the months leading up to his death, Webb had experienced the death of several close relatives, including his brother, who died as a prisoner of war. The emotional toll these events took on him seemed to have had a significant impact on his mental health. Webb's past, marked by isolation and mental anguish, painted a picture of a man in turmoil, someone who might have seen death as a way to escape his inner struggles. Despite this emotional context, the question of how Webb died remained unresolved. Investigators continued to consider the possibility of poisoning, given the lack of external injuries and the signs of organ congestion found during the autopsy. Digitalis and ouabain, both cardiac glycosides, were considered plausible poisons, but tests had failed to identify any common poisons in his system. This left investigators with few solid leads, and Webb's death began to be seen as either an elaborate suicide or something more complex, perhaps even an assassination. The mysterious nature of his death lent itself to theories of espionage, though the lack of hard evidence made this hypothesis speculative at best. The code in the book, a series of letters that still had not been fully deciphered, loomed over the investigation. The lack of progress in cracking the code seemed to symbolize the overarching mystery of the case, one that was forever elusive. Was the code meant for someone close to Webb, or was it simply a last act of desperation from a man who had nowhere else to turn? Given that there was no clear message, its purpose seemed more obscure. Some experts believed the code might have been part of a one-time pad encryption, but without the key to the cipher, the meaning could never be fully understood. The connection between Carl Webb, Jessica Thompson, and Alf Boxall continued to perplex investigators. Jessica's role in the case remained mysterious. She had been the one to provide the telephone number found in the back of the Rubaiyat, and had once had a relationship with Alf Boxall during the war. The possibility that she knew more about Webb's death lingered in the minds of investigators. Had she been involved in espionage, or something more nefarious? Or was she simply a woman with a past connected to two key figures in an ongoing mystery? As the investigation deepened, it became more and more likely that Jessica held some answers, yet she remained silent. Despite efforts to probe her past, Jessica Thompson's reluctance to engage with authorities or share anything that might have shed light on Carl Webb's death only deepened the suspicion surrounding her. In later years, her daughter Kate Thompson would suggest in interviews that Jessica had known more than she let on, though Jessica never confirmed any of these speculations. Kate's belief that her mother had a connection to the Somerton man would forever haunt the case, as it pointed to Jessica Thompson's potential role in a much larger narrative that authorities had yet to uncover. In the years following Webb's identification, several theories emerged, some linking the case to Cold War espionage, and others focusing on more personal aspects of Webb's life. One theory suggested that Carl Webb may have been involved in covert operations for a foreign government, and his death on Somerton Park Beach was the result of a botched mission. Yet, there was little evidence to support this claim, and no links to intelligence agencies or spying activities were found in Webb's personal history. Another theory leaned toward the idea that the Somerton man was simply a man in despair, driven to end his life after enduring personal losses and emotional pain. The suicide theory gained traction, especially after the discovery of Webb's mental health issues and his previous suicide attempt. This would explain the lack of violence, the absence of external injuries, and the neatness of his clothes. The idea that Carl Webb may have left behind a message in the form of the coded note seemed less about espionage and more about a man's final attempt to communicate his feelings of hopelessness. His attempt to leave behind a message, though unclear, might have been his way of explaining his actions, perhaps hoping that someone, someday, would understand his reasoning. Despite the progress made with DNA testing, the case of the Somerton man had still not reached any definitive conclusions. The identification of Carl Webb had only revealed a partial answer, but it had also exposed the vast gaps in knowledge about the true nature of his life and death. The code in the Rubaiyat and the mystery of his final moments remained key aspects of the investigation, and the questions about his connections to Jessica Thompson and Alf Boxall would continue to haunt the case for years. With no clear answers to these lingering questions, the Somerton man case persisted as one of Australia's most puzzling and unsolved mysteries. The clues, though intriguing, seemed to lead only to more questions, leaving investigators and the public alike to wonder what really happened to the man found on Somerton Park Beach in 1948. Would the code ever be cracked? Would the truth behind Carl Webb's death ever come to light? The case remained open, with answers just beyond reach, leaving an enduring legacy of mystery, speculation, and unsolved secrets. Despite the years that passed, the mystery surrounding the Somerton Man case continued to captivate the public. The identification of Carl Webb in 2022 brought some clarity, but it only added to the growing list of questions that had remained unanswered for over 7 decades. The Somerton Man's death was a strange, tragic, and mysterious event that seemed to defy explanation. Even with Webb's identity confirmed, the circumstances of his death and the coded message in the Rubaiyat remained unsolved. As the investigation continued, new theories emerged, each attempting to fill the gaps in the story, but none could definitively explain what had happened. The involvement of Jessica Thompson remained a significant part of the case, but her silence only fueled the mystery further. Was she hiding something? Did she know more about Carl Webb and his death than she let on? Some theories suggested that Jessica might have been connected to intelligence work, possibly explaining the mysterious and cryptic nature of the Somerton Man's death. Was Webb a spy or a covert agent? Did he die as part of a larger geopolitical struggle? The case was rooted in a time of intense Cold War tension, and the possibility of espionage lingered, even though there was no direct evidence to support it. Other theories leaned more toward personal tragedy, speculating that Carl Webb had been a man deeply affected by the loss of multiple family members in a short period. Could his emotional distress have led him to take his own life? The possibility of suicide was always present, especially after it was discovered that Webb had previously attempted to end his life with ether. The way he had been found, neatly dressed and with no signs of a struggle, fit the profile of a man who had planned his death. But the code in the book still raised the question: why had Webb gone to such lengths to conceal his identity? Despite the conflicting theories, the Somerton Man case remained unresolved. With the code still undeciphered and the mysterious circumstances of Webb's death left without a clear explanation, the case continued to intrigue both professionals and amateurs alike. True crime enthusiasts, armchair detectives, and the general public all followed the case closely, hoping that one day the truth would come to light. The DNA test that identified Carl Webb was a significant step in the investigation. But it also raised new questions. How had Webb, an electrical engineer, become the mysterious Somerton Man? Was there a deeper connection between his work and the cryptic clues that had emerged? Did the Rubaiyat play a role in his death? Or was it merely a symbol of his troubled state of mind? The code in the book remained an enigma, and no one could definitively explain its meaning. In the years following Webb's identification, the case began to attract renewed interest, especially from journalists and documentary filmmakers. The Somerton Man's death had become a symbol of the unanswered questions that often haunt history. Despite the passage of time, the mystery remained as compelling as ever. Was Carl Webb the victim of a spy operation, a botched mission, or something more personal? Was he the victim of circumstance, or had he orchestrated his own death? As more and more people became interested in the case, new details began to emerge, but they often only deepened the mystery. For example, in 2013, the possibility of a connection between the case and the H.C. Reynolds ID card surfaced. Some believed that Reynolds, an ID card holder who had served during World War I, might have been connected to the Somerton Man. The match between their ear shapes was considered noteworthy, but it was not enough to definitively conclude that they were the same person. The Somerton Man case, now decades old, continued to be a subject of speculation. New theories were proposed, but many were based on circumstantial evidence rather than hard facts. Despite the efforts of investigators, the true cause of Carl Webb's death and the mystery of the code were still unresolved. The case had become a symbol of the complexity and intrigue of unsolved mysteries, one of Australia's most enduring and compelling cold cases. At the heart of the mystery remained the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, with its coded message and the Tamam Shud scrap of paper. What had the Somerton Man been trying to communicate? Was it a message to someone else, or was it his final attempt to explain his own death? The lack of a definitive answer left the case hanging in the air, unresolved, but still fascinating. In the end, the Somerton Man case remained open, but the answers seemed increasingly out of reach. Carl Webb had been identified, but the full story of his life and death remained a mystery. The case was filled with intrigue, cryptic clues, and unanswered questions that continued to captivate those who delved into it. While the identification of Webb brought the case closer to resolution, it also highlighted how much was still left unknown about the true nature of the Somerton Man's death. The Somerton Man had become a legacy, not just a case to be solved, but a symbol of the enduring mystery that often surrounds unexplained deaths. As the investigation continued, people would undoubtedly keep asking, what really happened on Somerton Park Beach, and was the true story of the Somerton Man ever likely to be fully revealed? The case was far from over. With the DNA identification, the case took a dramatic turn. But the answers still seemed distant. The Somerton Man had become more than just a victim. He had become part of a larger unresolved story that continued to haunt Australian history. The mystery lived on, forever a part of the Somerton Man's legacy. And still, no one could say for certain how it all ended. The questions remained unanswered. As the years passed, and the Somerton Man case remained unresolved, it evolved from a puzzling mystery into a cultural phenomenon. The identification of Carl Webb in 2022 brought new attention to the case. But many questions persisted. The cryptic code, the missing page from the Rubaiyat, and the connections to Jessica Thompson and Alf Boxall continued to fuel speculation. While the true nature of Carl Webb's death was still shrouded in uncertainty, the case had grown from a local mystery into a global enigma, with people around the world still captivated by its unresolved aspects. The case's lasting impact was seen in the numerous documentaries, books, and articles that explored the mystery. True crime enthusiasts and amateur sleuths continued to revisit the case, offering new theories and ideas, though none could provide a definitive answer. The Somerton Man became one of the most iconic unsolved cases in Australian history, symbolizing the complexity of death and identity in a world where sometimes the most profound mysteries remain beyond our reach. One aspect of the case that continued to resonate was the eerie timing of the Somerton Man's death. The Cold War had just begun, and tensions between world powers were reaching new heights. Some theorists believed that the Somerton Man was not just a victim of personal tragedy, but possibly caught up in something much larger: a spy ring, intelligence operation, or even a political assassination. The mysterious circumstances of the death, combined with the coded message, suggested that there might be a secret at play. But with no concrete evidence, it remained purely speculative. Despite the code not being deciphered, and the lack of clear evidence linking the Somerton Man to espionage, the theory persisted. Many speculated that the Somerton Man was involved in intelligence work, possibly working as a spy who had been killed for reasons unknown. His neatly arranged appearance, the absence of identification, and the code seemed too deliberate to be the result of an ordinary suicide or accidental death. Yet, the authorities had no hard evidence to support this theory. As new generations of investigators and researchers delved into the case, they sought out fresh perspectives and new methods of investigation. DNA analysis had been a game changer, providing Carl Webb's identity and ruling out other suspects. Yet, Webb's identity brought with it a flood of new questions about his life and death. The emotional toll of his personal losses, his history of mental health struggles, and his failed suicide attempt seemed to suggest that his death could have been self-inflicted. But the mystery of the code in the Rubaiyat, which continued to resist any clear interpretation, made it impossible to rule out other possibilities. While Carl Webb was now known, the investigation was still haunted by the fact that the Somerton Man's death had occurred under circumstances that defied any easy explanation. His final message, the cryptic letters and the phrase Tamam Shud, seemed to represent not just the man's death but a larger, unsolved mystery that had perplexed the world for over 7 decades. The absence of any clear resolution left the case open, continuing to intrigue and captivate those who followed it. What made the Somerton Man's case even more compelling was its persistence in the public imagination. Despite the scientific advancements in DNA testing, genetic analysis, and forensic technology, the case remained elusive. The Somerton Man had become a symbol of the idea that some mysteries might never be solved. No matter how much time passed or how much new information surfaced, the case had become more than just about solving a crime. It represented the unresolved questions of identity, secrecy, and the unknown, capturing the collective imagination. The Somerton Man story became a cultural legacy that left an indelible mark on Australia. It was no longer just a police case. It was a national symbol of how the most baffling mysteries could persist for generations. The ongoing public interest, driven by new theories, books, documentaries, and investigations, ensured that the Somerton Man story would not be forgotten. As the years went by, the Somerton Man case became a timeless enigma, one that had reached beyond Australia's borders. It had captured the imagination of people across the world, making it one of the most enduring, unsolved mysteries in modern history. The combination of the unidentified body, the cryptic code, the mysterious book, and the absence of any concrete answers created a mystery that would likely never be fully explained. Even with the identification of Carl Webb, the case's legacy lived on, as the mystery of the Somerton Man would continue to intrigue people for generations to come. The unresolved questions about Webb's death, the code, and the connections to espionage would likely remain unanswered, but they would forever be part of the enigma that was the Somerton Man. And so, The Somerton Man's legacy endured as a reminder that some mysteries, no matter how many years pass, never truly fade. They linger in the shadows, waiting for answers, leaving behind an air of intrigue that continues to captivate the world. As long as the code in the Rubaiyat remains unsolved, and the identity of the Somerton Man continues to elude us, the case will live on, one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of the 20th century, its legacy written in the pages of history. Even though decades had passed since the discovery of the Somerton Man's body, the case remains unsolved. The identification of Carl Webb in 2022 marked a pivotal moment in the investigation, but it did not provide closure. The mysterious circumstances surrounding his death, the cryptic coded message, and the connections to Jessica Thompson and Alf Boxall have continued to intrigue both the public and investigators alike. The case of the Somerton Man stands as a symbol of how some mysteries, no matter how much time passes or how much evidence is uncovered, remain unsolved. Despite technological advancements, such as DNA analysis and forensic techniques, the fundamental questions about Webb's death have not been answered. The Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam and its coded message remains central to the investigation. The strange markings found in the back cover of the book and the Tamam Shud scrap of paper continue to provoke questions. Was it a secret message from the Somerton Man to someone, or was it simply a personal note that conveyed something only he understood? Despite the best efforts of cryptographers and researchers, the code remains a mystery, and its meaning is still unknown. As the years passed, the mystery grew into a national obsession. Journalists, amateur sleuths, and documentary filmmakers have continued to explore every angle of the case. Countless books, articles, and documentaries have been produced, each offering new theories, but none have managed to provide definitive answers. The case has become a classic unsolved mystery, one that is regularly revisited by people fascinated by the idea that some truths will always remain beyond reach. The case also remains a symbol of the era in which it occurred, the early Cold War. Many theories suggest that the Somerton Man could have been a spy, a covert agent involved in intelligence operations, but no concrete evidence has ever emerged to confirm these speculations. The timing of his death, the mysterious circumstances, and the coded message all point towards something larger than a personal tragedy. Yet, despite the best theories, the case remains unsolved, with espionage remaining one of the many unconfirmed theories. For Jessica Thompson, the case has never been far from the public eye. Her name, intertwined with that of the Somerton Man, has continued to raise questions, especially as people continue to speculate on her role in the case. While some believe she knew more about the man's death than she ever revealed, the truth about her connection to the Somerton Man has never been fully uncovered. Despite years of scrutiny, Jessica remained silent, and after her death in 2007, the questions about her involvement went unanswered. In some ways, Carl Webb's death and the mystery surrounding the Somerton Man exemplify the unpredictability and complexity of the human experience. Webb's life, marked by personal loss, emotional suffering, and eventual death, was consumed by mystery. His story has become a symbol of how an individual's story can become lost in time, turning a simple death into a national enigma. The mystery of the Somerton Man is not just about who he was or how he died. It's about how a single moment in time, a strange death on a quiet beach, can resonate for decades. As the years go on, the Somerton Man continues to capture the imagination of people across the world. Some will continue to believe the case will eventually be solved, while others will accept it as one of those rare mysteries that will remain unsolved, with no answers ever forthcoming. Carl Webb's death, though identified, has become a story of its own, one that will likely remain unfinished for the foreseeable future. It stands as a timeless enigma, one that asks us to question how the world's most puzzling cases can leave us with more questions than answers. In the end, the Somerton Man's case represents a legacy that continues to intrigue and mystify. Despite the DNA match that identified Carl Webb, the code, the mysterious circumstances, and the questions surrounding his death remain as compelling as ever. The case of the Somerton Man is a reminder that sometimes the most profound mysteries are the ones that refuse to be solved. No matter how much time passes, or how much evidence comes to light, some questions may never be answered. For now, the Somerton Man remains a mystery. The cryptic clues, the book, the death, and the unanswered questions all continue to haunt the investigation. The case lives on as one of Australia's greatest unsolved mysteries, its legacy enduring in the collective memory of those who continue to wonder about the true story behind the Somerton Man. Like, share, and subscribe to stay with the mystery crime for new cases.